This is the Roots to Risk podcast, hosted by Eric Schneider alongside Isaac Bock. Roots to Risk brings you insights, the latest stories, and long-form discussions about the cannabis industry. You'll hear interviews with industry leaders and their perspective on current and future trends, how they've built success, and what challenges they have faced. Our goal is to facilitate candid conversations and provide informative content for the cannabis community at large. Let's go! What's going on, Isaac? How are we doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. We got another one on deck. Dr. Shane Johnson from Bay Medica. Going to be diving into more on the minor cannabinoid side and more on the biotech side, really than your traditional CPG products. And definitely interested in learning more from Dr. Shane. But just a little bit background on him. He's primarily focused on strategic business advisory service companies in the biotech and healthcare sectors. He's worked for a number of different biotech firms, including Biogen, Amgen, Gentech. And for the past 4 years, Shane's work has been focused on the cannabis and cannabinoid space. And he's developed a strong working knowledge of clinical opportunities in the sector. He's currently of the board of directors of several cannabis-related organizations and is the co-founder of one of Nevada's leading cultivators and producers of premium cannabis products, including a patented lozenge. Shane holds a BA in studio art and BS in neuroscience from Brown University and MD from Stanford University. So really excited to learn a little bit more about Shane, his background, and what Bay Medica is doing in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'll be able to provide a unique, more scientific view on cannabinoids in general, based off of his background and very impressive background and what Bay Medica does.
Absolutely. Let's bring him in. Hey, Shane, how are we doing today? Thanks for joining us on the Roots to Risk podcast.
I'm doing great. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing great. Can't complain. Got in the thick of conference season now. So we got MJ Unpacked this week. We got Benzinga next week, but excited for this Roots to Risk podcast. And, I think just to kick things off, would love to just get a little bit more background about you, your organization, Bay Medica, and what you guys are doing in this space.
Sure, of course. Yeah. So my background educationally is in neuroscience and medicine, but never ended up practicing medicine. I worked in the biotech sector with a variety of startups as well as strategy consulting with much larger companies for many years, and kind of got pulled into, or at least became interested in the world of cannabinoids about coming up on, well, actually over 10 years ago now. I credit cannabis with saving the life of a then neighbor's eldest son. And so that got me wondering, well, how the heck with my educational background don't I understand this? And, ultimately had a stint working in the regulated market in Nevada with the plant. And this is back in the early days of Nevada's legal marijuana market. And then ultimately became very interested in the role of rare cannabinoids, and also we became a little bit disenfranchised, I would say, with some of the variability that you'd get batch to batch, crop to crop, with plant-based material, and it was tough to necessarily offer. I mean, I think plant is amazing, but if you want to make a product that is the exact same every single time, you need to basically have pure input materials and then be able to develop products based on specific ratios of those input materials, whether those are cannabinoids or other materials. And so that ultimately led me to start Bay Medica along with a couple of PhD chemists, one of whom is a very gifted synthetic chemist, another of whom is a true pioneer in the area of commercial yeast engineering, so basically reprogramming yeast to make, in this case, cannabinoids rather than beer. So we started Bay Medica with basically bringing kind of a biotech approach to how do you make some of these these cannabinoids. And we've got a team of PhDs doing all the hard work. And at this point, fast forward, we're now a subsidiary of InMed Pharmaceuticals, a publicly held NASDAQ traded pharmaceutical or biopharmaceutical company focused on the development of FDA-approved drugs, leveraging cannabinoids. And then we also have a commercial business wherein we are making and selling some of these rare cannabinoids that are non-intoxicating. And those can be used in a variety of different end applications. So I know I packed a lot in there, but hopefully that gives you a good lay of the land.
Yeah, one question I had is, everyone's kind of very familiar with THC, CBD, CBN. What are some of the other rare cannabinoids that you guys are focused on or have found success in, both on the more consumer side as well as your just general research?
Sure. I mean, so I would say, our two leading cannabinoids, and I think another two kind of leading rare cannabinoids outside of you've got CBN, which, most people would consider to be a rare cannabinoid, obviously pretty readily made or synthesized from hemp CBD as the starting material. We have focused on, historically, our first cannabinoid that we ever launched was CBC, or cannabichromene. And then another one that's, I think of great interest to a lot of people because are some pretty good data sets around it is THCV. We also make and sell CBT, CBDV. We're looking at launching another. We have another couple of rare cannabinoids in the pipeline. But the further afield you go, I think one of the things that I find fascinating about these rare cannabinoids is small differences in the structure of the molecule can lead to huge differences in terms of the effect, and that's obviously kind of the driver to explore the world of these rare cannabinoids is differential effects. And yet we don't, we've had a paucity of research being able to be done for so long in this industry as a whole. So, we're really still at the early days of figuring out what all of these other cannabinoids do. I mean, there are, I think, depending who you believe, there are ballpark 150 cannabinoids found in the plant. So the one, when you mentioned THC and CBD, those would be only two of them, so there's a long ways to go, a lot of potential out there. And, so there's a whole world of other cannabinoids, and a lot of these cannabinoids that are out there, that exist in the plant don't even have names. They're like literally nobody's worked with them enough to give them a name. So.
Got it. And would you say that you guys are more supplying like other operators or just direct to consumer? What's been your guys, I guess, strategic?
We don't do any direct to consumer.
Okay.
So we are focused on what we do well, which is, again, kind of taking a biotechnology approach to, we're really trying to make kind of the purest, highest quality rare cannabinoids that we can. So trying to hit the best spec, and we're making them plant identical. So what the plant makes is what we're making, and we put a lot of energy into ensuring that that's what we do. And then we let other people do what they do well, which is, making finished goods, selling them to the end consumers, educating consumers more directly, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, and that makes a ton of sense. As it relates to kind of the synthetic version you guys are making versus the plant version, what's the difference in kind of shelf life and stability of the molecules itself? Because I do know degradation has been a huge issue with some kind of consumer, plant-based products. Is that still an issue you guys are working on figuring out, or is it a little bit more stable through your process?
Well, I think, again, when you talk about an end consumer product, it's not just the cannabinoid stability that you have to worry about.
Right.
It's the entire formulation. What's the packaging like? Is it exposed to air, i.e., is oxidation an issue? Or, is it exposed to UV light? Is light an issue from a degradation standpoint? Is it exposed to heat? So these are the type. I think that there's a lot of commonality in terms of the things we think about, and stability in terms of what can cause something to be unstable. In terms of the innate cannabinoids themselves, some are definitely more stable than others. THCV, Delta 9 THCV specifically, is less stable than CBC or CBT. That's just a simple fact. It's less stable than CBD. And when I say less stable, it can degrade from delta 9 to delta 8. You can get that conversion with, in particular, to kind of time and heat. But THCV itself is also very, it's subject to oxidation. So you can't just sit there and crush it up in a mortar and pestle and let it sit in the open air and expect that you're not going to end up with something different inside a fairly short period of time. So how you work with the different cannabinoids can be very important, and how one would work with CBC, which is a non-crystallizing oil, versus THC, which is more of, say, a Jolly Rancher type of consistency. They're very, very different compounds, and they need to be treated differently and managed differently. All of them, I think, stored properly, can, as a single bulk ingredient, can be very stable. So we've had CBC retested after a couple of years, kept in a cool, dark environment, so specifically a refrigerator inside of a kind of an aluminum type of vessel that doesn't let light in, and it's been stable a couple of years later. I mean, we're not seeing any differences, any degradation. So again, it depends how you're handling this, and ultimately the devil's going to be in the details when it comes to finished goods.
And then one question I had, Shane, is, obviously there's still a lot to be discovered, kind of, what you alluded to. But like, what would you say are key factors driving the growth of the minor cannabinoid market, and how is Bay Medica positioned to capitalize on these trends?
Sure. Look, I think the biggest thing is really what I mentioned earlier, which is a drive by both manufacturers and ultimately consumers for differentiated effects. And obviously you can package novel branding and things around some of those differentiated effects and novel marketing campaigns or what have you. But I mean, just take a very simple example. I think most people, would say, hey, THC, what's it do? It can give you, depending on the strain, maybe give you couch lock, give you the munchies. It kind of put you there on a zone. Well, THCV, same core structure. The only difference between delta 9 THCV and delta 9 THC is two carbons on the side chain. THCV has two fewer carbons, 3 instead of 5. That difference of 2 carbons, instead of THCV basically giving you the munchies and putting you to sleep, THCV is generally thought to increase focus and energy and decrease appetite. So, pretty remarkable change with just kind of really a
Pretty
2
big
carbon
split.
difference. And that, I think, is what people find exciting, is that these small differences can lead to huge different, small differences in the molecules can lead to huge differences in terms of effect.
And
With your guys' focus and your parent company's focus kind of on the biotech side of things, what are some of the most exciting developments you guys are looking into, or things that are most interesting moving forward as you guys continue to do the work on these minor cannabinoids?
Sure. Look, I think, to me, I have to divide that into that question into kind of two halves. I've got the commercial ingredient side of things, where again we're focused on nature identical compounds. So, you know, uh, the delta 9 THCV we make is going to be the same as the delta 9 THCV that the plant makes. We just have an easier time making, kilos and kilos of it, versus trying to extract it and isolate it at a really high purity and quality from the plant and not have there be other compounds in it. So, so in terms of what excites me on that front, it is literally, broad, as we learn more about some of these other cannabinoids, whether it's, most likely through third party research and coming from academic laboratories, or potentially just from anecdotal information that we hear from the market, that we're able to start to get, pull together a story and get a better understanding as to what some of these cannabinoids may actually do. Then it allows, kind of gives us the impetus to consider actually trying to make that in bulk and offer that up for sale to the market, so that we can, consumers at the end of the day can benefit from the potential differentiated effects. So that's kind of one piece of the puzzle, which is really about the, health and wellness and CPG space broadly speaking. And to be clear, I would consider THC to be part of health and wellness. Lord knows it's a safer way of relaxing at the end of the day than the cocktail that I typically prefer. So, from a health perspective, it's not a bad one. And then there's the pharmaceutical side of it, which is incredibly exciting. Again, we have decades where no real research was done around cannabis. I mean, THC itself has been an FDA approved drug for quite some time. CBD, basically mixed with sesame oil, effectively is Epidiolex, another FDA approved drug now. I'd have to go check the most recent numbers, but it's probably approaching somewhere on the order of $500 million a year in sales for the treatment of seizures. Those are big market opportunities, and I think where that gets really exciting to me is the implication, based on data that's out there, that cannabinoids may have roles in, really some of the, I'll call it the biggest untapped or under tapped frontiers of medicine, neurodegenerative disorders, even treatment of cancer. Obviously we had a chemotherapy and a lot of cancer treatments available for a long time. On the neurodegenerative side of things, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, it's a pretty limited subset of treatments that we've had access to historically, and most of those have been targeting the symptoms, kind of an improvement, a temporary improvement of symptoms, not actually altering the disease trajectory. So where that whole arena gets very exciting to me is is doing the research around cannabinoids and potentially cannabinoid analogs. So small variations. You could imagine if I made 50 slight tweaks to CBD, just changing the side chain a little bit or what have you, 50 very slight structural changes, the possibility or even probability that one or more of those 50 variants would be more effective than CBD itself with a side effect profile that's no worse for the treatment of seizures is actually relatively high. And that, again, pretty exciting when you think about the potential impacts for medicine and targeting a bunch of diseases that, really have some significant unmet needs.
Yeah, and you just kind of proved why cannabis and the cannabinoids being listed as Schedule One drugs makes zero sense, considering there's already FDA-approved drugs using them.
It is asinine. Yes. So yeah, I would agree with you. We could have a whole separate podcast on regulatory insanity and shenanigans.
What's really interesting, Shane, is a lot of times when we have folks on here, it's more focused on truthfully the recreational market and not as much, like looking at cannabis industry as more of like CPG than, biotech and healthcare. And so I find it very interesting, your guys' angle, but also how they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me jumping in on that,
No, absolutely.
I think what we see is people even in the regulated markets wanting cannabinoids. We've all heard about the entourage effect. I kind of tend to prefer the term ensemble because entourage implies that there's some sort of a standard bearer, i.e. one person leading a procession and one molecule leading a procession. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily true when it comes to cannabinoids. But what I'm getting at here is that, in even the regulated markets, I think there's a growing recognition and interest that you can create differentiated experiences that may involve THC. Some people take THC to get high. Well, can you modulate that by virtue of including other cannabinoids? Reduce the anxiety levels that may come with a THC containing product, or have it work even better for a restful night where you're not waking up in the middle of the night with pain from your sciatica or whatever the case may be. So again, there can be a modulation of some of the effects. So to me, all of this is one big continuum. We're kind of in this, I'll call it, odd space of creating dividing lines, in part because of the legacy of how, again, THC has been treated, and now then marijuana versus legal hemp, et cetera, which is, it's really all cannabis sativa L, right? I mean, it's the same darn plant. It's just a matter of different expressions of that.
Yeah,
And
and
I think,
with kind of since you brought up the, sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good, IB.
No, I guess just because you brought up the entourage or ensemble effect, as you called it, have you guys looked into doing any work on the terpene front? And how, working on synthetically creating those? I know it's more of a flavonoid than anything else, but kind of on the entourage
Yeah.
effect discussion that can impact how your body reacts to it in certain ways.
We have not directed our efforts at that. I mean, we've talked about it at times. We certainly could, but we're a small company with just kind of limited resources, human capital, dollars to put into things. So we've stayed focused thus far really on cannabinoids. It's not because of lack of interest in some of these other avenues. And I suppose at the end of the day, if it's determined that XYZ very rare terpene, was really of huge interest, I would welcome anybody to come, let me know about that. And if you can't get it elsewhere in nature and you're looking for, hey, can this be synthesized in a way that makes it, gives the identical product? Happy to take a look and we can discuss. But, again, it just hasn't been a focus largely because again we have a I can count the number of PhDs who are doing all of the hard work in the lab on my fingers. So if we were a much bigger company, then yes, absolutely, I'm sure we'd be tackling kind of the broader cohort of potential compounds and interactions.
And Shane, obviously there's been a heightened level of consumer education, but there's still a long way to go. How can the industry, in your opinion, improve consumer awareness and understanding the benefits of minor cannabinoids? And because I definitely think that that's a big barrier is just consumer education and understanding of the different effects, right? I think a lot of times, and we're starting to get away from it, but people are just purely looking at THC percentages and saying, well, that one's got a higher, so like I should buy that. And, you know,
Well, that's a big no, right? Bigger must be better, right? The higher number must be better, and
yeah,
not necessarily true. And I also think there's been a problem with I mean, the industry is look. We need more data. That's the number one thing we can do is to create more quality data and share that data. That's the number one thing we can do. But the industry itself has not done a great job of I mean, the industry is a mess. It's a mess in terms of, people talk about these cannabinoids. And for those of us in the industry, yeah, we may know the differences between all of these 3-letter acronyms, but for a lot of other people, it becomes alphabet soup. And then all of the issues and information and misinformation around what is safety profiles, what is from the plant, or their residual solvents. A lot of people know that what the labs, what people say is in the products isn't really in the products because of independent lab testing that's been done. So the industry has kind of brought on a lot of these issues as well by, I mean, there are a lot of bad, let's be clear. There are a bunch of bad actors out there, or historically have been a bunch of bad actors who have made it harder for people who are trying to do this right and get the right information out there to separate themselves from the noise. And so there's a lot of different angles to take on answering that question, I suppose, at the end of the day. But I think the best thing we can do is everybody make things according to kind of CPG type best practices, i.e. in a CGMP facility, food grade facility, and where you're following all the letters. Get things tested by reputable labs. Don't go lab shopping for the highest numbers. Ideally, even get multiple tests so that you can have COAs that corroborate each other. I mean, again, the list can go on, but I think there's so much we can do as an industry, or the people who are trying to drive this forward, to just do a more consistent job, so that over time this matures the same as any other things that we see out there in the CPG world. Right? Nobody thinks twice about vitamins. Nobody thinks twice about vitamin D in the milk that your kids may drink, but these are things that are made,
Yep.
added into products. We don't worry about contamination in vitamins when you go buy vitamins at the vitamin shop. People worry about that with cannabinoids, and for good reason. The industry's done a poor job of showing that it can be trusted.
No, and I think that's a great place to wrap things up, Shane. And this has been awesome and really a lens that we haven't really taken on the show, looking at more on the science side and looking at minor cannabinoids as the focus. And I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate the time. And going to be looking out for what Bay Medica produces this year and in the future.
Well, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it. And I just in kind of a closing note, I'd say, yeah, keep a lookout. I think there is the future is bright when it comes to rare cannabinoids, and I think overall when it comes to the broader CPG markets and the role of cannabinoids in those markets. I think there are a lot of products that'll come forth over the coming years, and it'll be an exciting time for both manufacturers, brands, consumers who are looking for some of these differentiated effects.
Absolutely, Shane. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate you. Another solid one in the books. A little bit of a different angle than I think what we've traditionally had on the show, and it was great to just learn more about the different minor cannabinoids. I know you have a lot better background in that than I do, but just seeing what the future potential of products is. If you want a specific type of feeling and a specific type of effect from products, being able to customize that a lot more so and really drilling down into, you know, bringing together different types of cannabinoids to create various different effects, which I thought was very, very
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. I think it's really unique and cool what they're doing, and I think companies like Bay Medica are going to kind of help push the cannabis industry overall forward, just because it does prove the hypocrisy of how the legislation is currently in place, which we can't get too much into. But yeah, it's very interesting to see the work they're doing on minor tweaks to what the plant molecules look like versus what they're creating to create those unique effects that you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, and I think at the end of the day, there's more research being done, but need more continued research, right? And folks like Shane are leading that charge, and it's great to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Very, very interesting one, and looking forward to the next one.